Hello and welcome back to The Give and Go. I am your co-host Reynoso here with my boy
Soltero. What's up, guys?
We're going to be talking about England, man.
Ah.
England. This team, good Lord. They are one of the most talked about teams, if not the most talked about team going into the World Cup. Who doesn't have a thing to say about England? Are they good or are they bad? And to so many different people, it's a different response, a different answer.
Dang, that's true.
There's so much to dissect about this team. So we're going to look deep into what this English squad has going into the tournament. But before I do that, I want to look at their history, man, see what they've achieved in the World Cup. They'll be making their 16th appearance this time around going into this tournament. Some notable things they did in their time. 1966, man. The one and only time that football has actually gone home, man. They were champions. They won the championship. They were World Cup winners. And since then, they haven't achieved that, man. You fast forward down the timeline, and in 1990, they had a chance to make it back to the final, but they got fourth place at the end of the day. 2010 is another notable World Cup experience that England had because that was one that we got to see, where they had the controversial pre-goal line technology play where the ball went halfway in against Germany and ultimately knocked England out of the tournament, with Germany winning that game 4-1. And then in 2014, they disappointed once again, going out in the group stage with Costa Rica, Italy, and Uruguay. Fast forward to 2018, the most recent World Cup, and they got close, bro. They got close. A fourth place finish, but that came after they lost to eventual finalist in Croatia in the semifinal. And once again, just left hoping for football to come back home and forming so many different types of debates with this team because in qualifying, they had an incredible run, man. 8 wins, 2 ties, no losses.
Jesus.
39 goals for, 3 goals against. This is a group that had Poland in it, a feisty Albania side, and then Hungary, who we mentioned are just a year off. So there was some notable teams in this group. They topped it easily. They then got drawn into Group B with Iran, USA, and Wales, the most political group at the tournament. And they find themselves back at the World Cup, yearning for a potential World Cup victory. But what makes this team so interesting is that their form is so weird, bro.
Oh, dude.
Their form is so weird. If they had gone into the World Cup off of the high that they had formed during qualifications, this team would be one of the most talked about teams in the world. But because of Nations League and because of their awful performance there, with them actually getting relegated.
No. They were winless.
Winless. We have some really interesting debates happening with, is this team ass, bro? Is this team shit? Is Gareth Southgate the wrong man to lead the squad? Or are they simply not putting in the effort and time into Nations League? And are they actually a really good team still going into the tournament?
There's so much to talk about when it comes to this English squad. As you were talking about before, maybe one of the most debated teams in international football. Even when they were bad, people would just talk about England and what they could potentially do at an international tournament. I remember in 2010 and especially in 2014, there was just constant talk about England. Could they maximize Lampard and Gerrard alongside like Wayne Rooney up top? Could the back line be enough for England to make a deep run into the tournament? But there was always weaknesses kind of laying out through this English side. So there was always doubt, man. There was always doubt, but there was always a weird amount of hope because all the players play in the Premier League. Top 5 league in Europe. So there's always that chance that just the quality of the players were going to shine through. And I think that's what a lot of the English people, the English media, always kind of banked on. They knew that they weren't going to necessarily dazzle because they didn't have the superstars of the Dutch team at the time or the superstars of the South American teams at the time. But they knew at the very least they could just bank on their players playing in the Premier League, the best league in the world, especially by how they market it, man. And, you know, that's honestly something you can bank on. That is something that you can back because if you play in the Premier League and you start, you're one of the you're like top 5, top 10% player in the world. Just in general, if you include all leagues in the entire world, you play in the Premier League, you're one of the best, just in general. So I think it was always an argument to be had. You could always pick apart every English team and see why they weren't going to be good in tournaments, man. I mean, I thought 2010 was really bad, that obviously a USA game in the group stage. I remember seeing England, I was like, these are the guys that invented football. It was because it was my first time watching a World Cup, and so I was so pro US. I was like, dang, we're better than them.
The gap ain't that big.
The gap ain't that big, and I was like, damn, like what is going on over there? But the thing is, that trend just continued, man. No matter how good the English teams were on paper necessarily, they had really poor tournaments, man. You said group stage exit in 2014, but they also had really weird Euros. Really didn't do much in Euro 2012, and in Euro 2016, they got knocked out by Iceland. When I remember when that happened, there was so much chaos in England because they were like, we are the mighty England getting knocked out by tiny little Iceland. I remember, dude, so many of the pundits, the coaching staff, even the players themselves were truly embarrassed for themselves and for the nation because they're like, shit, we not only did we lose, but we lost to a team that we just absolutely should not if we consider ourselves to maintain a certain pedigree in the footballing world. So come 2018, man, I honestly didn't know what to expect because there definitely was quality, but there's always been quality in English squads. This one was a little different though because for the first time, at least from what I had seen, they had definitely let go of that old guard. That Euro 2016 was the last straw. They said, okay, we're not going to rely on any of the players that we relied on before. If you're in form and preferably you're 25, 26 years of age or younger, you're probably going to play here. And that's why we started seeing players like Harry Kane really come to the foray and kind of almost captaining and leading this team up front. Obviously, there were players like Sterling coming into the fray, Kieran Trippier in fullback position, Dele Alli. What a name that was back then, man. 4 years ago, Dele Alli may have been one of the best center mids in the game. And at least for a good 12 months. Yeah. And in 2018, that's when he was really on form. But again, none of these names had featured before at an English tournament realistically. So it was definitely a change of guard, a change of mindset for England in 2018. And my God, did it work out. Going all the way to the semifinals, but they were able to do it with an energy. People saying football is finally coming back home. Sure, maybe it was a joke at first, but the longer the tournament went on, the more realistic it actually looked. And I was like, dude, like I've never seen an English team play this good. Yeah. With the amount of dynamicism that they had, the energy, the drive, and the way that they were pressing teams and just attacking any opponent that they face. I was like, wow, this English team is youthful, but they're also incredibly skilled because they're all based in the Premier League. It was the perfect blend of what England should have been for the last 10 years. This is what England should have been, what they were trying to be prior to 2018. And finally, they cracked the code in 2018 under an interesting manager with Gareth Southgate. I remember when he first got appointed, I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Who is he? And I know a lot of people kind of had a similar reaction. Obviously, English people knowing who he was, maybe to some certain extent, but especially here in the States, there's really no background to who he was. So I was like, all right, this is truly a change of mindset to see what's going to happen for this English team, to see how they're going to play. But again, I think it worked because you erase ego, you erase any sort of veteran history in that team, and you have a completely new English squad. Almost like a snake kind of molting its skin and just kind of revealing its new, freshest form. And that's what I saw in England in 2018, man. A really good young team that was genuinely hungry to try to win some silverware. And my God, did they get deep. Obviously, in Euro 2020, they just did the exact same thing, going all the way to the final, losing just to Italy in penalties. So now it gets interesting here. It gets very interesting because when you look at how this English team has evolved ever since Gareth Southgate took the reins in 2018, this team might even be better than they were these last 4 years. This might be the most talented team. It's a lot of the same players that made them successful in the first place in 2018 and 2020. I'm talking about players like Harry Kane, Raheem Sterling. Even though a lot of people may not like it, but Harry Maguire has been huge for England historically in these last two international tournaments. And so there's a lot of names that England have relied on these last 4 years that are still here. But then you have new names that could really come in and make a genuine impact on this team. I'm talking about players like Jude Bellingham, or a player right now in incredible form, Bukayo Saka. Phil Foden. Foden was not here 4 years ago in 2018. Hell, maybe even a Jack Grealish off the bench. There's so many new players that England have at their fingertips to really maximize this squad. England could make another big run here. They've made 2 back-to-back deep runs in international tournaments, 2018 of the World Cup, Euro 2020. There is an absolute argument to be made that England can do it again here in 2022. But before we get to that squad analysis, man, I do kind of want to bring up the topic of their recent Nations League form. Because what does this mean? When you really look at it, if you try to explain it, if you ask Southgate, why didn't you guys win a single game in the Nations League? What is his answer, man? What does he actually have to say? Does he give excuses? Does he say, I got it wrong? Does he say he's tinkering with the team too much and maybe there's just a lack of consistency, lack of chemistry among the players playing? Does he say, it just wasn't our day? How do you explain going 6 games winless, man? What at the end of the day, what do you think it was? Because I have a take on it.
I am just a little weirded out by the Nations League results. I do think there's a little bit of an argument to be made that he's kind of tinkering with squads there because game to game, the squads are completely different almost. You have different people starting up front with like Tammy Abraham starting a few games. Then Kane will come in. And then at back, you'll like have Tomori and Dyer in some games. Yeah. Same with goalkeeping. You'll have Nick Pope or Ramsdale in the match. So there hasn't really been consistency with the squads that he's put out. So for me, I do see a fair reason for why he struggled and why he eventually got relegated in one of Europe's toughest Nations League groups.
When I saw that last Nations League game against Germany at Wembley Stadium, obviously Germany go up 2-0, and I'm like, Jesus, England really are in a hole right now. I'm like, good God, they can't play better in front of their fans. But then they went on to score 3 unanswered goals to take the lead 3-2 in a matter of 15 minutes. And within that 15-minute span, I was like, this England, this 15-minute version of England that I saw score 3 straight goals against Germany, this is the England that can go to a semifinal of a World Cup. This version of England is the team that can go all the way in any major tournament and truly, truly contend for a title. And then they ended up conceding and it'd be 3-3. And I'm like, okay, there's still some doubt. There's work to be done. Absolutely. But it gets interesting because what I saw was possibly almost like a bout of indifference in some of those other Nations League games, man. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it because I never give teams excuses. When they play bad, I'll criticize them. If they play bad, but they had like weaker tools, then I'll praise them because it's so tough to beat teams that just have more tools or resources than you. But England have all the resources in the world. Their playground is the best league in Europe, the Premier League. So for me, there's really no excuse to go winless in general, in any tournament, in any setting. So in that case, I want to be critical, but it's also tough because 4 of their Nations League games was after a crazy Premier League season. Was after Liverpool going to a Champions League final and playing Madrid to complete an incredible Champions League journey, falling just short. And then a week later, England had 4 straight Nations League games. So it gets really interesting in the sense that like England specifically are the only international team in the world where most players at club level probably have a better time than they do playing for their international team. And what I mean by that is that when you're playing with teams like Manchester City every single week, or teams like even like Chelsea when they were flying high, or Liverpool last year, 2 years ago, you're playing the best football in the world. You're playing with the best players on the planet. So then when you kind of get disrupted by that, by having an international window, you're like, can I just stay at Tottenham? Like can I just stay here for a little bit longer? Yeah. Like I'm playing good. I'm very focused. Conte's in my ear. Like It gets really, really intense in the Premier League. And I think that's why it's the most watched league in the world for a reason, bro. So it gets interesting because I think there's a psychological difference that these English players have to go through that most other players don't have to. And I'm not saying that Serie A or Bundesliga or La Liga is not as intense. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is from like a media perspective, from just a cultural pressure, the English media is tough on these players, bro. Absolutely tough. There's no mercy when it comes to it. Yeah. And so at club level, when you have to kind of try to take your mind off it and go play for England for like a week, I think that can be really, really distracting. Which is why I'm giving them just a slight pass in their Nations League performances, just a slight one. I hate doing it because they shouldn't. They have the tools to win, but it's the only way that I can maybe make any sense of it. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it gets so interesting. If there's that much pressure and playing at the end of a grueling season, are you going to play your best? Are you going to try to avoid injury? Or are you just going to be like kind of half-assed their performances, man? But again, it's not the best of excuses. And I hate that I'm giving England this excuse, but knowing what they're capable of when they actually focus is why I might be willing to give them this pass. Because kind of as you said, when England actually play together and they're focused, they can beat anybody, man. And we saw it against Germany in that last Nations League game when they finally turned the switch on. England can play high quality football. It's just a matter of if they're going to. Thing is, I'll end it with this. England's quality is too high. Their quality is way too high to have just a really shitty performance in any tournament, especially right now. I think the reason why England have been successful over these last 4 years is because the Premier League has lined itself to be the best league in the world. Prior to 2016, bro, La Liga was the best league in the world, and Premier League was just, second or third, honestly. Like, even Bayern Munich was playing really, really good, and Bundesliga in general with Dortmund in like 2012, 2014 were doing really, really well. But right now, over these last 3 to 4 years, as Liverpool, Manchester City, Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United slightly more recently.
Brighton.
Fuck it. Newcastle. As all of these teams have drastically improved, it has only helped increase and improve the quality of the English players themselves, bro. So at the end of the day, I think the stars are lining up for England to still have a really successful tournament because of the sheer quality that is at their disposal.
I think England will be coming into the tournament as one of the most deep teams at the World Cup. Mm-hmm. For every position, there's about 3 names that you could rotate and switch out. And I think that's why Southgate did that during Nations League so much. So we're going to try to kind of formulate here who we think he's going to go with when the World Cup is here, because once the World Cup arrives, you can't really be tinkering and fiddling with all these players.
That's true.
You got to have a set lineup. So to start all the way in the back, 3 options that we could have is Jordan Pickford from Everton, who started for England in both the World Cup and the past Euros. Yeah. Did an incredible job. I'll never forget his save that he had on Jorginho in that penalty shootout. I cannot believe he came up with that save,
It's
bro.
An incredible save.
I can't believe it. That was one of the highlights of the tournament for me, man. I loved seeing that. Right behind him, you also have Aaron Ramsdale from Arsenal, who made that move from, I believe it was Bournemouth a few years back, and has popped off these past 12 months, man. Yeah. Becoming an Arsenal fan favorite and being that secure goalkeeping option in the back for the first place team in the Premier League. So that in itself is a huge achievement and a huge reason for why Southgate should at the very least consider him for a goalkeeping spot. The last option that I've seen Southgate go with, I think he's gotten like maybe 1 or 2 starts in the Nations League, is Nick Pope, who now makes his bread at Newcastle United, man. The high-flying Newcastle United. 3 amazing options right there. But, I was actually thinking about, is there an opportunity here for Ramsdale to actually snatch the starting position? I think the experience of Pickford throughout these past 4 years has just earned him the right to that starting position. Despite Ramsdale, I just don't think Ramsdale is up to that level. If he was just slightly better, he'd probably be able to make a case to get the starting position over Pickford, regardless of Pickford's experience. But with Pickford still showing that he can be really good for Everton and at times be man of the match for them, I think it's still Pickford's spot to lose. And I think he's going to be starting for England when it comes time.
Yeah, I completely agree. Southgate has built this team on trust. Once he trusts you, it's really hard for him to actually not pick you. And he's done that over the last 4 years. But not only that, Southgate does have his favorites, and I think Pickford's one of them, man. But it is interesting because he has, in a way, auditioned Ramsdale and Pope over these last, 4 or 5 months. He's given them chances to at least prove that they could start if he absolutely needed them to, which I think is important to have. But at the end of the day, I do think Southgate is he's going to go with the reliability of Jordan Pickford because he knows exactly what he's going to get. And it's a good keeper at the end of the day. It is interesting, though, because statistically, Ramsdale and Pope have better shot percentages than Jordan Pickford.
That makes sense.
Statistically this season. But that statistic can also be flipped, though, because Everton have allowed more shots on goal than both Newcastle or Arsenal. Another interesting thing, though, is that Newcastle have the best defense in the league.
Damn.
So it makes sense why Nick Pope all of a sudden is getting these call-ups, is getting the chance to at least show himself and play for England. But despite all of that, as I said at the beginning, I think Southgate has his favorites, and Pickford is just one of them. And it's not a bad decision at the end of the day, in my opinion.
Dude, I think there's something that I love about the World Cup, which is oftentimes you'll see players on certain teams kind of almost represent the people, kind of represent the country that they're from. To me, Pickford is one of those guys that represents the proper Scouser, man. This guy is just so goddamn English, and I love it. Looking at the back line, we've had some interesting developments here. I'll go over to the right back position.
Sure.
One of the biggest developments is the injuries of certain players. And England had one of their best players get injured in the lead up to the tournament. That player is Reece James, man.
Yeah.
The Chelsea starting right back has made a name for himself these past few years, and he's been great, bro. A great offensive action, but also has the physicality to keep up with the defensive needs of a Premier League squad. And so he's been incredible all around, and he's been improving every single year, but England's not going to have that, bro. They're not going to have that.
Southgate actually has an interesting situation here because he could basically do what he did for Maguire in Euro 2020. There is a chance that Reece James will be healthy come like the first group stage game, and maybe he could play come that second or third group stage game. So it might be worth it for Southgate to actually still call him up as he's going through rehab and recovering from that injury. Again, because in Euro 2020, he did the same thing for Maguire. Maguire didn't really make his full appearance until the third group stage game. And then from there, he started every single game, including the final. So this could be a very similar situation where Southgate says, look, I know you're going to be injured for a while, James, a couple more weeks, but if you can be healthy for us come mid or late group stage, it still might be worth calling you up, because a healthy Reece James, I think, starts for Gareth Southgate in that right back position. But it also depends on what type of formation that Southgate ultimately chooses. I think that right side is 100% James's if it's a wing back position, 100%. Especially since Chelsea like to utilize a back three in general. So James is a lot more comfortable in that more offensive wing back position already. It does suck though, because it's up in the air right now. He might not get called up. If the ability to be healthy early or maybe middle of that group stage, maybe he does get called up, man. It'll be interesting to see.
Trent Alexander-Arnold's form, man.
Yeah.
A complete dip in quality from what he achieved, honestly, for like the past 4 years. From the moment he got that starting job at Liverpool, he was incredible, bro.
Yeah.
Incredible. And honestly, what he's going through right now may just be a slight dip in form, and he might get back to that top-notch level in the future. But going into the World Cup, he's got one of the least favorable forms. And I think the argument for him starting is completely gone now. It's been completely dismissed. Likewise, on the left side, man, I think there's a really interesting conversation for who gets this starting position. You have Kieran Trippier from Newcastle, the ex-Atletico man, won you the championship, and then Luke Shaw from Manchester United. Luke Shaw, to start off, put on a goddamn performance at Euro 2020, man.
Yeah, he did, bro.
God, that guy completely stood out amongst the rest. Probably one of the best 12-month spans that we saw from Luke Shaw was during that time.
Yeah.
Trippier, though, bro. Trippier, for me, is my favorite out of the bunch because Trippier is a goddamn winner. Whether it's a duel-to-duel type of play where he has to come out on top and win that matchup, where it's a guy who's pressing him, trying to get past him, or whether it's a mental aspect. Trippier dominates in every single category, and he has so much, honestly, a little bit of flair that he can add to his game offensively to help the people up front. He went to Atletico, and all it took was 1 year for him to win a goddamn title there.
Yeah.
He's gone to Newcastle now, and he's shown that, my goodness, what a addition he's been to the team, because he just revitalized them defensively, but also in the leadership aspect. And I think when it comes to guys like that, I mean, you can never have too much of these guys. He's almost like an Octavio, but almost a little bit better in his position. Like, I think he is such a reliable, useful tool that England could have. And for the fact that this team can so often be criticized, for the fact that the media can so often test your mentality going into a tournament if you're English, Kieran Trippier is one of those guys that I wouldn't be worried about. I wouldn't be worried about him being too nervous on that first game or not showing up. If anything, I'd be more sure of him being one of the better guys on the pitch. For me, I think Southgate has to go with Trippier.
My only problem with going with Trippier is that, yes, he's playing really well with Newcastle, and Newcastle in general is flying high in the Premier League right now, man. I mean, they're having an incredible season. But if you take that context out and you looked at Trippier, who he is right now as a player, and you compare him pound for pound, skill for skill, and you compare him to Luke Shaw, I do think Shaw actually has the edge over him right now here in 2022. And for that reason, I actually think Southgate might be more inclined to start Luke Shaw, because I do think from a technical perspective, Shaw is actually a little bit better right now. I think at one point, Trippier had pinpoint accuracy on his crosses. He was a little bit more physical, and I think he was a little bit faster. My only point against Trippier is that I do think he's slightly past it. And since the replacement for Trippier is an in-prime, in-form Luke Shaw, who is now getting the faith of Ten Hag to start over Malassi in that left-back position, man, I think Luke Shaw actually has the better shout to start right here, right now, come November timeframe.
Yeah, that's the one thing I can see, is that Southgate has that trust in him, man.
Yeah.
But I'm actually going to go out here and say that I think it's the wrong call. I think Shaw is the wrong call here. I think Trippier's ultimate mentality means way more to me with how important that is for an English squad. And I've seen him play for the national team and how he just revitalizes them. But also Shaw does very similar things as well. He's a different type of player.
Yeah.
Something about Trippier, man. Something about him really gets me. I think it's going to end up being really interesting seeing how that plays out. And if Shaw shows a dip in form or in quality, then I hope that Southgate can maybe give him that opportunity. Center backs, man. Center backs. For me, these two are pretty secure. I don't see any other two players starting if they're going with the back four system. If they go with the back three, then we might see one of the reserve players step up and join them. Harry Maguire paired up with John Stones from Manchester City. The backup options could be Dyer from Tottenham or Tomori from AC Milan. But for the most part, it seems pretty set in stone that Maguire is going to be paired up with Stones. Perhaps if they go with the back three, I think Dyer joins them in that back line.
I think there's three main center backs that are always in Southgate's mind. It is Stones, Dyer, and Maguire. It's just non-stop criticism for Maguire at Man United, especially this season under Ten Hag. But it doesn't matter. Maguire still plays. He's still in rotation. Maybe he has a bad game and he gets benched, but in that next game, Ten Hag picks him to start. It really doesn't matter what we think about him. Southgate, Ten Hag see the quality in Maguire, and at the end of the day, he's going to start for this English national team. And alongside him, again, you have pure quality still. Whether it's Dyer, who's been really good for Tottenham for a couple years now, or John Stones, who's a really good center back and in that rotation for Pep Guardiola at Manchester City. So that back line, I think, was a big reason why they were successful in 2018 and in the Euros, because they finally had center backs that they could truly rely on just on one-on-ones or getting big in the box. And it's going to be the same center backs that hopefully can give them that same success.
This goes back to Southgate. Actually, I'm going to put pressure on him here. I think that his job this World Cup is to see which players are in their best form once that ball kicks off against Iran in their first game, because with the options that you have, man, you got to make sure that you get it right. The pressure to get it right will be immense. As a whole, I'm not that worried. But in terms of maximizing what this backline can do, man, I mean, for example, if Harry Maguire has a meme of a game in that first match, does he have the balls to bench him the next game and put up a guy like Deere and give him a chance? Because mentally, in a World Cup, having a mistake of that level could really do something to a player. And I'm not saying Maguire can't handle that, because Jesus Christ, he's handled so much shit this past year.
Right.
But I think that he has a responsibility to make sure that he can get the 100%, the most juice out of these guys. And if he doesn't, it'll be on him, because, bro, this backline is good enough to be top 5 in the world.
Quality-wise, this is easily a top 5 backline in the world. This backline is stacked, man. In pretty much every single position, there's elite depth. And I think in that regard, Southgate will have to make decisions in the group stage to ultimately line up his team and pick the best backline that he can when it starts to matter in the knockout stage. Because I'll say this, I think England are in a manageable enough group to where he can actually make a couple of wrong decisions at the back. Whether maybe he starts Maguire at first and Maguire's just not on it for the tournament, right? Southgate will have to eventually make the decision come knockout stage to decide who's going to be that back line, because I think then that's when the decision is going to come back to haunt him if it ends up being a wrong one. I think he can tinker actually in that group stage, because if I'm being honest, man, if I'm being completely honest, I do see this English team as a lot better than any of their opponents in this particular group, even if he makes a couple of mistakes with his squad selection. But come knockout stage, man, if he's just feeling the same players and we see weaknesses or we don't see the type of energy that we've seen them have in Euros or World Cups before, then I'll be worried for England. Then at that point, we'll know that Southgate just does not have the ability to make the correct decisions on the biggest stages.
Yeah, and to go along with that Southgate point, I want to talk about the midfield, because with defense, I correlate that to form and who's playing at their best. I'm going to put that pressure on Southgate. But with the midfield, I think Southgate has to find the right way to put these guys in the proper places in the field. Because that's one concern I have with a lot of these midfielders, is that I don't often see them play up to the level with the English national team that I see them at club.
Yeah.
You have incredible names, man. Let me just list some of these names off.
Yeah.
Declan Rice,
Yeah.
Jude Bellingham, Conor Gallagher, Jordan Henderson, Calvin Phillips, Mason Mount could possibly consider midfielder
And
at
absolutely,
this point. Yeah,
absolutely.
Just incredible 5-star level talents that could start in the midfield for Gareth Southgate. But the one sure guy to play on this team will be Declan Rice. Declan's getting the start 100%. Who's going to get paired up alongside him? I'd love to have a conversation about that, because I think there's so many different options and so many different type of midfielders that I want to get the best out of both.
Yeah.
So who do you think pairs up with Declan Rice?
Well, from a fan perspective, I think you're left really frustrated, because if everybody was healthy, I think the best three midfielders that Southgate could field would be Declan Rice, Calvin Phillips, and Jude Bellingham. You'd have the box-to-box style of Calvin Phillips, who had an insane introduction to the international stage at the Euros. We saw how effective he was for England, but also for Leeds during that season, man. He was awesome. He was a hell of a midfielder, playing so well that he got scouted by Pep Guardiola.
Yeah.
That's how good Calvin Phillips was. You have the energy and the drive and honestly the class in a player like Declan Rice to pair alongside a kind of more physical and destroyer type midfielder in Phillips. And then I think you would be able to maximize Jude Bellingham's creativity, his youthfulness, but his also knack of just always looking for that open player in space. And then you couple all that together with Bellingham also just being a straight up baller. I think that's how you maximize, is that you have Phillips and Rice in that double defensive pivot, and you kind of have Bellingham roaming, whether he wants to get involved defensively, but he also have the ability to get involved offensively. Or here's where it gets unlucky, I think, if you're English. Calvin Phillips is injured, man. Mm-hmm. And he's been so injured in such recovery from that shoulder injury, in the sense that, dude, he hasn't played. He just has not played whatsoever. And even if he was healthy, it'd still be a little bit questionable, because he'd have to compete with Ilkay Gundogan and Rodri at Manchester City. So it's like this move for Calvin Phillips just was bad timing, in my opinion. And it sucks, because if we had a healthy starting every week for Leeds Calvin Phillips, then it would be the perfect midfield three for England. But unfortunately, we're just not going to get that at this tournament. We're not. I don't see Phillips even getting started, and he might not even get called up if he just does not fully recover, man. So what are you left with then at that point? Well, you're left with a conundrum. How do you maximize Jude Bellingham? I think Declan Rice is going to start, and I do think Bellingham is going to start. The thing is, what I think Southgate is going to do is I think he's going to put Bellingham in a more defensive role. He's going to line him up right alongside Declan Rice, and they're going to both play very similar styles. They're going to mainly have a focus on ball retrieval and proactivity on the defensive end. And then from there, they can use their quality to distribute the ball, give it to their wingers or their wingbacks, and that's going to be their main role. I don't think it maximizes Bellingham's true ball playing ability, but I do think it's what Southgate mostly trusts. Because when you look at all the other midfielders that you played, man, I don't think Southgate prefers them. I know Conor Gallagher has gotten a little bit of a shout. We've seen Mason Mount kind of play a little bit. I know he did feature at the Euros a lot, but Mount was also in high-flying form for Chelsea at the time, and I think his form has dipped a little bit, kind of similar to Trent, honestly, in the sense that like Mount's going through an interesting time at Chelsea, but so are a lot of Chelsea players, and I think Southgate sees that. But when you look at Jude Bellingham and Declan Rice and how they're playing at club level, they're still playing really, really well. And I think that's why Southgate is going to have complete trust in starting those two. But I don't think Southgate knows who his third midfielder is. That's the biggest thing. I don't think he knows who he can truly trust. There's other players that he's also kind of tried to audition. I'm talking about players like James Ward-Prowse, for example. But again, very similar to Mason Mount and Conor Gallagher, I just don't think he's fully convinced by any other midfielder that he's tried to play alongside Bellingham and Declan Rice. Here's what I've seen Southgate really do as a solution. He avoids the problem. What he does is he plays a back three instead. And honestly, to maximize the sheer quality of his squad, it might be the go-to answer, because if he's not convinced by a third midfielder, well then find a way to play Eric Dyer, John Stones, and Maguire all at once. Or maybe you slot in Kyle Walker in a wide center back position, a position that he does play at Manchester City for Pep Guardiola. And now you can play Maguire, Dyer, and Walker, or Maguire, Stones, and Walker, and still have Shaw and Reece James, if they're healthy, out as wingbacks. So I think that's how Southgate is ultimately going to solve this problem, is he's just going to avoid it altogether. You're going to make me pick a third midfielder? I'm going to pick a center back instead.
Shit, man. But imagine being Jordan Henderson in here.
That's
man.
the thing.
When you were describing that, I was like, man, this sounds like the prime opportunity for Jordan Henderson to sneak his way back into the starting lineup of England. This is kind of what he thrives on, man. It's kind of being that filler midfielder. Kind of just doing the light work, providing that safety and reliability. And he's done that a lot for Liverpool, man. He's not the most fancy player, but he can oftentimes be a very assured option, a leader out on the pitch, man. Thing is, like you said, it might be something that he just completely avoids. I could definitely see that, because it goes back to the point of maximizing the ability of these players. I'd rather have 11 players playing on a 10 out of 10 level rather than having maybe two guys in that starting lineup not be playing at their full potential. So that's a really good point you made about the midfield. Offensively, bro, I have a preferred three, and I'm talking like I'm his assistant or some bullshit, man. But I'm whispering in Southgate's ear, hey, man, I have a preferred three if you care to hear. And if any of the viewers care to hear, man, let me just go on a little tangent here. For me, I think this pod knows, man, if you saw the Reynoso show, you know how big I am on Phil motherfucking Foden, bro. The star boy, man. 22 years old, has played in every single big match available to you at the club level. Playing under Pep Guardiola in that Man City system has 100% gained his trust, and you could argue that he did this 2 years ago, bro.
Yeah, dude,
He was 20 years old, maybe even 19. Phil Foden is a star, man. He is a star. For me, I think there's no way he doesn't start for this English national team, even if you have a guy like Saka popping off right now for the #1 team in the Premier League. Even if you have a really feisty, really aggressive player and perhaps Jared Bowen. Even with all those players, I think Foden still tops him, man. I would still have way too much trust and reliability with this kid because of what he's been able to do at the club level and with how good and impressive he is technically on the ball, man. This kid is like it's like a mini Messi, bro. Like the English Messi at this point. I think Phil Foden has to start alongside Harry Kane up top and Raheem Sterling on the left side.
Yeah, I think Phil Foden is ice cold, man. He's cold out on that pitch. And whether it's for Manchester City or England, he's going to start, and he's going to feature as probably the star winger for England, man. Again, as you said, his ability on the ball is pretty much unparalleled. Only a few other players in the world can truly match Phil Foden's ability. And you're right. When you look at who Pep really trusts in that winger position, Foden plays more than Grealish or Riyad Mahrez. So Foden has proved himself. It's insane. Yeah, that's insane.
Insane.
Foden, at such a young age, has proved himself to be better than most of the good wingers at the best club in England, in Manchester City. So Foden, for me, is England's star winger. And yeah, he's going to feature out on that right side for England. Then right alongside him in the center at the #9 position, man, Harry Kane, the captain, the one and only. If you're a striker on this team and your name's not Harry Kane, you're not playing. You're not playing a single second.
Start warming up that seat, bro.
Exactly. And that's kind of funny because I've been seeing recently people like, hey, give Tammy Abraham a chance. Callum Wilson, who actually right now doing really well for Newcastle United. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because Harry Kane is playing every single second at this World Cup, and he's not going to be subbed off. The only way that Abraham or Wilson, if he gets called up, maybe Ivan Toney, if he gets called up too, the only way they're playing is if England's down a goal, they'll come on in the 92nd minute to try and get a corner kick.
Now, the only way Harry Kane doesn't play is if Erling Haaland becomes English, bro. That's the only fucking way.
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
He's second to Haaland, I would say, just right now in terms of form. He's an incredible striker. Do we even need to talk about him in that sense, man? I actually want to talk about the other backup options. Tammy Abraham, he's been called out by social media. People want to see a guy like him featuring, get minutes, but I just don't. I think he's a little bit more limited. I don't think he can do all the things that Harry Kane can do.
Yeah.
And even a guy like Ivan Toney, man, people actually want him to come to the English squad because of his incredible penalty record. Have you seen that shit?
Oh, what?
He's like ridiculously accurate with penalties. He's made like his last 30 penalties. It's crazy. He's like like the English Jorginho, man. And honestly, I would consider calling him up in case that you have a penalty shootout. That would be his only role for a team. We might actually see a guy get called up for his penalty prowess. That'd be insane if Ivan Toney got called up.
These backup strikers, yes, actually have really good quality at club level individually, but they just will not cover any time that Harry Kane does. They just won't.
Yeah. On the left side, do you see Grealish at all getting a chance to start over like a guy like Sterling?
That's the thing. Again, when I was talking about the back line, Southgate has his favorites, and Sterling is one of them in that front line. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, how good or bad Sterling is doing at club level, and his form has been a little suspect at Chelsea. He's just not really outputting that much, but at the end of the day, it's still a physically primed Raheem Sterling. And Southgate knows what he can get out of him. He likes the runs that he makes off the ball. He likes his penetration on the ball. I just feel like he's going to start Sterling. But I do see actually a pretty big role for both Jack Grealish and Bukayo Saka off the bench. Like, for number 9's not getting any time off the bench, I do actually see a lot of wingers for England making a big impact off the bench.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I could see them, because a lot of them already kind of do that at the club level.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Even a guy like Jared Bowen, if he gets a few minutes, like he could really cause some damage on opposing teams' defenses. So I think, to me, England has one of the most exciting offenses in this tournament. So as a viewer of the sport, I'm looking forward to those English matches and to see what they can do offensively. All right, man, let's talk predictions. Let's round this whole thing out and talk about where do we see this English team actually finishing in the World Cup. I have no other prediction here outside of them getting first place in Group B. I don't have them getting second. I don't have them getting third. I don't have them having a catastrophic group stage and somehow ending in fourth. For me, England is going to get first place despite how bad they were in Nations League and despite all the talk around them. They're going to step it up in their group stage and they'll manage to win those matches. Real quick, I want to talk England-USA, bro.
Dude.
England, US fucking A, man.
Yeah.
If there's a list of my top 10 games in the group stage, this has to be like in the top 5, man. Yeah. This game is going to be incredible. I'm excited to see Pulisic face off against all these other players.
Yeah.
A lot of them which he plays with at the club level. And always the historical factor between these two teams is so fucking incredible, man. One of the games I'm most excited to watch. Whether they tie or whether they even lose that match, I still have England coming out in first. And what happens then? Round of 16 matchup where they face off against second place in Group A. Based off of my predictions, it's going to be Ecuador, but I'll open it up to perhaps a Senegal as well. Maybe even Qatar.
Sure.
I think if they face any of those three teams, they're going to take care of business and proceed to the quarterfinals. So hello, England. We are in the quarterfinal, boys. Now we're starting to hear those words of it's coming home. Could it be coming home? Maybe we were wrong. Maybe Southgate has something going here. What's going to happen? Well, I'll tell you right now. England is going to go into that quarterfinal match. They're going to be high on themselves. They're going to be feeling really good. They're going to be looking forward to potentially another semifinal appearance in their third straight major tournament, and they're not going to get it. England goes out in the quarterfinals, and for me, the biggest question that pops up is that considered a failure? Is a quarterfinal appearance for England considered a failure at the end of the day? If they put up a respectable performance, if they even lose like in penalties, are English people going to look at this as a wasted opportunity? I think so. I think with how harsh the media is, I think with the talent that this team has, a quarterfinal appearance will eventually end Gareth Southgate's tenure with England, and they'll have to start looking forward to 2026 as potentially a new chance to revitalize themselves. So that's what I see from England, man. I see a dark,
A dark review.
It's my honest thoughts. I think I actually lean a little bit more towards the contingent of English fans that are a little bit pessimistic about this team, because in that big match in the quarterfinal, do I see them getting the victory? As of right now, I just don't, man.
Right.
I don't.
To justify England having a really poor Nations League and just really poor form of as of recently in general, I have to then be harsh on them in this tournament and expect very good things out of them. I have to set the bar really high for them if I'm going to give them a form pass. So for that reason, I actually agree with you. I think if England get out in the quarterfinal stage, it's a failure. And if they get out at any point earlier than that, it's a debacle. It's embarrassment for England. So England have to, at the very least, go to the quarters, in my eyes. If they don't make it there, then it's a shambolic display at the World Cup for me. So I have England going to the quarters. I do think they can get there, and they have to get there, bro. If England, with the squad that they have and the talent that they have in every single position, if they don't prove themselves to be a top 8 side, man, that's embarrassing. Yeah. England have to go to the quarterfinals. I'm putting that pressure on them. I'm not even saying that I predict that they will. They have to, bro.
I agree.
They have to.
They do have to.
They have to go to the quarterfinals. From there, it's just going to completely depend, bro. They have the skill to go to the semifinals. Like I said, I do think this English squad is actually more talented than they were in 2018 when they did make that semifinal appearance. I think it's pretty much the same quality that took them to the final in the Euros. The only difference might be just a little bit of form for some players, right? But it might be picked up by form with other players, because I think you could actually argue that Jack Grealish might be in better form right now. He's not the star that I thought he would be this season, but I do think Jack Grealish is actually still playing at a high level when he does appear for Manchester City. To have that off the bench, what other team has a guy like Jack Grealish coming off the bench, man? I don't think there really is any other squad out there that has that type of depth in those wing positions, man. And then you couple it all together with the absolute quality that Harry Kane possesses, man. That's a striker that pretty much no other international team has, because Kane can do it all, man. He can finish the ball. He's actually really good at feeding to his teammates, but he also likes to go in deep, bro. Yep. Harry Kane's low key kind of like a Wayne Rooney now, in the sense that like he loves to get the ball at midfield and kind of just play with it at his feet, and then he'll make that run after he gives it to his wingers. And the thing is, he still has the pedigree and the quality to get the ball in the box and put away an incredible finish. That's an elite striker that I just described. And England have that. Captaining the side will go down as maybe one of the best English strikers to have ever lived, and Harry Kane is in his prime going into this World Cup. So you talk about players that may be out of form, or players that are a little bit injured, for example, like Reece James. Maybe Pickford doesn't have that same form that he had in the Euros or in 2018 World Cup, but man, I do think it gets picked up by other players just having incredible seasons right now. So I have England going to the quarterfinals, and I think there's a very good chance that they make another semifinal appearance.
Damn. Yeah, no, semifinals would be impressive. Yeah. I think it's crazy how one game would define almost failure or success, bro.
Yes, that's all it is.
Jesus Christ, man.
That's why
that's the threshold.
And I think that's why England as a team gets criticized so much, man, because it's such a fine line, man. Yeah. It's that thin, like you said.
Yeah. And that is England. Please let us know your thoughts on this team. Are you on the side that thinks this England team is just absolute trash, or are you on the side that thinks this team is actually a lot better than what people make them out to be? Comment, like, and subscribe to make sure you stay up to date with us as we continue releasing more deep dives with the World Cup getting closer. Shout out to any English viewers that we might have, and we'll see you guys soon. Peace.